Hello, everybody. What's poppin'? How's everyone doing? Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Is this thing on? Let's see if this is playing or not. 1 second, because I don't want there to be a huge echo thing. That solve that problem. Hello, welcome to the live. How are you all, Angela? Because I don't want there to be a huge echo thing. That solve that problem. Okay. Hello, welcome to the live. How are you all? Oh, I get it. Something else is playing in the background. Okay, so don't mind me, the awkward silence. I'm super awkward. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate being awkward. It's kind of a funny thing. We always think that, when it starts to feel awkward, sometimes life is just awkward, but we think we're doing something wrong and it's like a trigger. So, alrighty, that's my big tip for the night. See you, everybody. That was it. Thank you. I like the shirt too. It's kind of summery, kind of vibing. How are you all? Let's see. Randy, hello from a flag I can't see. Sarah, say where you're from, Sarah. What's that flag? Rebecca, Livewads. Great. Good to be with you all today. Good to see you. And your questions were incredible. I tended to keep it to no contact questions. The other questions were fantastic too, but maybe for another time, because I kind of wanted to dive into. I got a lot of questions around no contact to begin with, and there's just a lot of ins and outs about no contact. There's just everyone's situation is different, and you'll probably hear me say as a theme tonight how I view no contact, which is I view no contact as getting a reprieve from perpetrators and abusive people in abusive situations that gives us space to work on ourselves. And, I'm not saying that's the only definition of no or low contact, but that's like the kind of like the way that I would see it as like a tool, a therapeutic tool for childhood trauma is to be able, we can't heal with the same people. We can't heal while we're being abused by somebody or in the same abusive environment. So thinking about it, thinking about it as a reprieve to get some therapy, to start working with your inner child, to change some belief systems, that's really the way I kind of see it. And it's really, everyone has such their own story and their own personal choices and their own situations that no contact can be a set period of time. It can be indefinite. Um, in a sad way, and I'm going to talk about this in an upcoming video. Um, the one of the hardest versions of going no contact is when the family actually, it sounds like a contradiction, but when the family actually isn't reactive to you going no contact at all, and they're like, peace out, we don't care anyway, like that's one of the hardest versions of it, because it's tricky going no contact already in a system that's already estranged. Does that make sense to you all? Like, maybe wave at me if anything that I just said made kind of sense, because to some people, not hearing from family at all would be what they're looking for. It might be a relief that there's no response. But for some, when there's no reaction at all, it can be just really, you know, really just complicated and really actually it's all pretty painful, but that's a different version of pain. So let me get my questions out. Where'd the questions go? So again, the theme, or what I'll probably talk about a lot in this, is thinking of not just getting peace from it can very much bring peace, going no low or no contact from perpetrators, but to be thinking about it, it's almost like, well, now what? Now that I've gotten space, now that it's been a while, that's really the opportunity to do some work. It's really the opportunity to start to reparent the inner child, that you'll see in how I answer these questions. A lot of these questions are around, what does the inner child still believe about themselves, about them family, about what happened. So, okay, diving into it. And now these are all anonymous. I kept everyone anonymous. So there's that. Okay, question number 1. You guys ready? You good? Cool. Please give some insight on how to talk to other people about our toxic family. As for many, it's very challenging. Normally, when you tell the truth, you get nasty judgments. You do, or disbelief, or toxic positivity, or they play the devil's advocate and try to excuse their sociopathic parent without knowing anything about them. Well said. That's really a very common reaction from people. But she's your mom. What are you going to do? I'm sure she did their best. See me talk about that a lot. The best approach is to, this is what the question is. It's more of a statement. Is this still in their question? The best approach is to say nothing, set privacy boundaries, lie, and wait before you know someone well enough to say anything. Please share your thoughts and ideas about it. You pretty much got it right there. That last part, the best approach is to say nothing, set privacy boundaries, lie. I don't know about the lying. Um, or more like maybe like just not disclosing and wait before you get to know someone well enough. That's really the defining piece. So it is very lonely to go no contact. So it's like where, I often joke about a coworker kind of saying, "Oh, Patrick, what are you doing for the 4th of July?" Because I'm going to go to Cape Cod with my family. We do bonfires. We're down there for 2 weeks. We love each other. It's awesome. And, I had to kind of say, I'm going to be smoking cigarettes in a coffee shop, reading my self-help books because I'm estranged from my family. It's like, it's hard. I can see where maybe lying or just kind of like downplaying it, like, oh, I'm just going to be low key this weekend or whatever. Um, that is usually the scenario that I kind of give about when people ask about that. And then in that same scenario, if I say that I'm estranged from my family, like, oh my God, I'm sure they're devastated by that. Maybe you should call them without having any background or knowing anything that's going on. So people are really goofy about that. What To answer this question, what I would say in terms of the theme that we're talking about is, it is possible to get to a place to kind of like not care about what people say and think about your family. It is your experience in that family. It is not sort of, it is your truth about what happened. The other thing that's helpful is to realize that people don't really know how to respond to someone when they say they've gone no contact. Those that do are probably going to be your people. Coming back to the question, is waiting and long enough to sort of know somebody to go there, where I feel safe with people when I would tell them that, and they wouldn't judge. They wouldn't go there. They just sort of might say like, "God, it must have been awful," or even if for them to say, "I kind of don't know what to say," but what they're not saying is the old junk of like, "But she's your mom." So I noticed that over time, where I really found that I became friendships, or I felt like I had a bit of community or a bit of support from somebody if they didn't go there. And they don't have to understand it, but it tells you kind of everything about their reaction as well when they do go. But she's your mom. There's an immediate like, um, they're immediately feeling for your family and disregarding you in that. So hopefully that made sense. But you pretty much got it, is to really wait a long time. Um, Before you get to notice somebody. You don't have to wait forever. But there is a point too that it does come up in conversation, and it is, I don't like the idea of testing people, but it is kind of like testing the waters a little bit of like, letting people know a little bit about you in that way, about your family situation. And it kind of tells you about whether they're safe or not. So appreciate that question. Moving on to the next question. Let's see. And also, if you've got questions, we've closed down the questions at this point, so try not to ask them in the chat. The chat is moving way too fast, so I wouldn't be able to see it anyway. But we submitted these to a Google form, and then I looked over those questions from really like what would be helpful to everybody about the topic. So next question is, how to know if no contact is the right choice for you. If no, I'm no contact with a physically abusive parent, but I feel guilty about the idea of going no contact with my mom. Everyone kind of dial into this question, because this is a really common and powerful and sad situation that a lot of us go through. So I feel guilty about the idea of going no contact with my mom, who was also abused by her husband and didn't hit me. I find her overwhelming, but she never did anything outwardly hurtful to justify abandoning her. I would support her financially if needed. I just don't want to have to hear from her. Tells me that the author of the question is really caught. And raise your hand out there if you relate to this, where it's sort of like the lesser abusive parent, or what I would call a non-protective parent, is really a complicated thing to deal with in terms of like how much contact, how to, this is going to come up in other questions as well. I just don't want to hear from her. I feel awful just typing that. Well, you're not awful typing that. I would just sort of say, for the author of the question, like many childhood trauma survivors in these situations with our family, you're really caught. But a couple things that's going on is the first thing is kind of a truth about this stuff is it's it's still horrifically hard, but it is easier to do no contact with the parent who is more blatantly abusive. The physically abusive one, the monster, the narcissistic one, but the harder one, and actually we have more work to do in therapy about the parent who didn't protect or the parent who was kind of caught up in it too. And many things are true in this. She's getting abused by her husband, but she's not taking care of you in that. And as an adult, she's somebody that I would kind of, it seems like from the question, somebody that she overwhelms you, she drains your energy. So might be a mom that has done no work on her own. She might be a mom who was not real about what happened to you. She might be a mom who was kind of quietly victimized. I'm not saying that this is true. This is kind of usual presentations in this stuff. And the thing I would kind of answer the question on is to rethink it. Sure, you could financially support her, but again, you're caught in the way you feel bad for her, but you don't really want her in your life. That's telling you that you weren't safe with her either, because you probably were the one who was abandoned by this two parent parental system. Raise your hand out there if you, and like, I love the question so much because it's that heartbreaking thing where we just feel so much guilt and shame and heartbreak for a parent like this. But the work is to try to not to, and to try to cultivate some anger about questions like maybe why didn't she leave? And if she couldn't leave, why didn't she talk to you more about what was going on and be protective and real with you? What is it about her that's overwhelming that she is maybe refusing to do any kind of work on? So the other big question with this is, I would ask if it was a client, like to say, I would remind them like, well, your mom had some power too. Your mom had some power to take care of you more. Your mom had some power to leave. Your mom had some power to be more real about it. And those are all very difficult concepts to kind of start to aim to like go towards and take in. The other question that I would have a hypothetical for the author is if you talk to her, what would she say about her involvement? Would she expect some response? Would she accept her some accountability in raising you in that way, in that environment? Or would she be defensive? Would she be a bit victimized? Would she be really shut down, like I can't handle this conversation? That's also telling you something. And again, you're, the less abusive parent, the non-protective parent, really what I kind of call them, we have much more work to do about them because it's like the main perpetrator is a little bit like it's kind of a no-brainer. Like they were just so awful that you don't feel for them as much as you would for the non-protective parent. So the other thing that you're getting caught up in is this very common. I would love to, if you all who are here with me relate to this one in this scenario, it's interesting that the author, you've gotten caught up in comparing, well, my dad was so bad, but she didn't hit me. It's a very kind of like concrete thinking structure that really lowers the bar about your mom. Does that make sense? Yeah, she didn't hit you, but did she protect you? Was she real about it? You don't have to answer these questions because I know it's like I'm having a one-way conversation, but it's just to get you to think about that. You're caught in comparing something really horrific to something just a little bit less horrific, which kind of gives you like a really like kind of like narrow vision of what the whole thing was around. I'd recommend if if you can, they're really really hard to find. They're expensive. Find a childhood trauma therapist. Check out some genogram work in my membership. Check out my membership if you can't get access to that. And people do spend some time kind of unpacking this other parent, which is where most of my therapeutic work was unpacking stuff about the non-protective parent. And not everybody everybody has that scenario where sometimes it's just like it's both parents are horrifically awful and there's really no lesser of two evils kind of a thing. So really appreciate that question. Moving on, let's see. This is a two-paragraph question. I know I'm not alone, and that a lot of people actively trying to heal from from trauma of childhood abuse may at times find themselves single estranged from their family and without many friends. I've had lots of failed and outgrown relationships along my path. In this juncture, deep on the healing trail, I live a pretty solitary existence, often quite peacefully, but just as often with the pain of having unmet needs for connection. It's another place that we get caught as childhood trauma survivors where we isolate, but then we really kind of don't feel kind of connected to anybody, it's not stuff we would have asked for, or signed up for. What advice might you have to help those of us who are navigating no contact alongside very frustrating natural urges to have attachment with others? It's during these times when there is no other humans in my life with whom I'm able to co-create healthy and secure attachments. When I struggle the most with the vulnerabilities of being no contact, overthinking, reconsidering, feeling guilty, ashamed, or generally conflicted about it. Coming back to that theme, you've gone no contact, but it's sort of like low or no contact is not that it's good, can bring peace, but we can stay kind of stuck within no contact if we're not working on ourselves, and especially around if we're not working on intimacy. You might not like my answer. I would suggest checking out my membership if groups scare you, because it's a lighter beginning to groups. It's an online forum with connection and talking without a lot of pressure, as you would say with a 12 step. My first recommendation is to find a childhood trauma therapist and join a group of other trauma survivors, and you start to feel more comfortable in your own skin as the group goes on, talking about this stuff in real time, getting a sense of community. And it's a lot like when we're in that place, our inner child is really going back to an early place where we're full of fear and we're full of shame and people aren't safe. Who relates to what I just said? It's really the inner child is in that place. We've been abused in these family systems. Things like friendships, and this is not universal for everybody, for a lot of us, friendships, work environments, we might think that we're just introverted when it's just that people can be exhausting because of the trauma. Not that the actual people are exhausting, but our body's response to people. And it's really a sad place that's really not good for us. So that's why you'll hear me recommend. A lot of people have big feelings about 12 step, but 12 step is something like Al-Anon or Coda or Adult Children of Alcoholics. Those are really kind of hit or miss. Some groups are great, some groups are not, but they're readily available and they're free, and you're in a group with people and you're beginning. It's like a little bit of a boot camp to get outside yourself and start talking to people. But a really good place I would recommend my membership. I'm going to give you a link to the membership that tells you a little bit about it. This is a monthly subscription membership. There is also a code, 20% off for the first 2 months. And in this membership, you are around other childhood trauma survivors working on some materials in RRP, which is the group therapy that I do. And it really is a good jumpstart to kind of get outside yourself a little bit and be around people. Even a good way to do that, if you really find people to be exhausting, is to start in a digital way and then maybe branch out to a group therapy or 12 step. But at the heart of this, from an inner child perspective, we kind of have to find our inner adult and take some action and start attending some kind of thing to get outside of ourselves and to be around other survivors. I don't advise kind of going out into the wild and maybe dating and just trying to fake it till you make it and hiding what happened to you and just trying to assimilate to the rest of the world. I did that for a long time. It's really not good. You just really will put yourself on a much lower rung than the rest of the world. Who relates to that? That you just try to pretend you're not traumatized and just assimilate with the normal people, the normal people in society. Um, that's really not good. So I would really recommend finding people who are like-minded, finding people who are in recovery as best as you can, and get out of the apartment, get out of your head, start having conversations with people. And it's like kind of going to the gym. It's not as painful every time. It gets easier every time. Um, so there's that. Really appreciate that question. Next question is, I'm in no contact with my parents. Sometimes we see each other at family functions or of one of my siblings who is still in contact, but don't talk there. I found out that my father is dying with only about a year left. Now I'm flooded with mixed feelings on if I should try to talk to him. I, for anyone who is thinking about going, pay attention to this one because this is eventually going to come up for all of us. um, I found out my father is dying with only about a year and a half left. Now I'm flooded with mixed feelings on if I should try to talk to him. I don't think it will turn out the way that I hope, but I'm worried. I regret not talking to him before he dies. I believe that you will. Um, is there any way I can prepare myself in this for this emotional wave? How do I find peace with that reality that my dad will die and I'll never get to any kind of good place with him in my life? Wow, really well stated, powerful question. Um, and I kind of have some hard answers. One thing about this is if depending on the level of safety to go visit somebody on their deathbed, I think it's good to go do that. But again, it's a personal choice, and it also depends on how abusive the parent was. Um, or the kind of damage they caused, and also what kind of mental state is the parent in. So that's kind of what I mean by safety. Um, but to go there and to just be present with them, I've had many clients in that situation, and the thing that they worry about mostly is they're not so much worried about going to do it, although that's kind of very difficult and freak them out to go do it. But the main fear is going to go do it and then something gets erased, like their truth gets erased, or they lose a sense of themselves, or they get sucked back into the family system. Does anyone have a fear like that going on? Like if you were in this situation that, or it's almost just like you're going to be present and, I think our inner child goes, if I go, I'm going to admit that I was wrong, and we can get kind of caught up in our head a little bit about that. Am I making sense to anybody out there? My chat's frozen. I just want to kind of check in on you guys. Or is maybe there's a lag. Give me 1 second. So if we go, my main advice is, and this is not what the person is asking, but just because you go, you can go and still hold on to what your truth is. Doesn't mean that you lose anything. It doesn't mean that you lose any progress. Um, So there's that. So I think good. 1 second. I think my chat and the other thing is a little bit frozen, but it's perfectly going fine here. So thank you for that. Let's see, where was I? And coming back to the person's question, how can you prepare yourself? It's gonna be a very difficult thing. And to just accept that you're gonna have an emotional hangover from it. But the thing I really want to zero in on in coming back to the work that we can do around going no contact is um, I hear in your question, how do I find peace with the reality that my dad will die and I'll never get to any kind of good place with him in my life? That's a very, the best way for me to put this, it's really hard, it's really sad. But for the childhood trauma survivor, usually when the abusive parent or the toxic parent passes away, we are still left holding the bag of not having closure with them. And closure would look like if on their deathbed, they were to kind of have a little bit of an awakening, or at least as best as they can acknowledge something that happened between the two of them that they were responsible for. We get closure from those things. Usually, and again, depending on, I'm not saying every parent is going to be like this, but I will say that there is usually still hubris, there's still resentment from the parent in these moments. So what I would advise is to go and just accept that they're going to accept them for wherever that they are at. But I would do a lot of inner child work beforehand, helping the inner child grieve and let go of the potential that they still have for the parent to get it. Does that make sense to you all? Because that's what I hear. How do I find peace? The reality that my dad will die and I'll never get to find a good place with him is that you've gone through all this effort and this pain to go no contact with him, but there's still a part of us that is still holding out hope that there might be a heart-based connective moment. And we got to really pay attention to that because there's something really powerful there. And it's so inner child based is that the inner child, the last thing that they want to let go of is the potential that things could work out with an abuser. Who out there has been with an abusive person and your inner child did not want to let go of the potential of that person becoming good or seeing them? Does anyone relate to what I just said? So this is it's almost like the last stage, advanced healing is when the inner child, not just the inner adult, understands that the parent is probably not going to be what they need or what they want. That is a brutal reality, but we can do good enough work to help our inner child really see that they were a good kid and who these people really are, and that our parents are just probably cocooned in their own childhood trauma and their own ego to even make that connection with you, some more nastier than others. But that's really where healing kind of takes place is when the inner child is like, um, I'm sad, but I'll say goodbye to him, but I know he's not gonna, he's not gonna kind of see me and I'm okay with that. That's some advanced stuff. Um, Advanced probably isn't the right word, but like sort of last stage kind of healing is sort of when we can kind of get to that place of radical kind of acceptance about that. So I really appreciate that question. I hope I've been helpful to you. This question is a little bit long, but I was really applicable. Moving on to the next one is it wrong to do a complete, let me just have a little bit of water. I'm getting froggy. Okay. Is it wrong to do a complete cutoff about my safer parent, mom, because Monster Dad did such a number on us as a family that I shouldn't really fault her for disregarding mine and my siblings' feelings about her disappearing for days at a time to be with her new boyfriend and his kids. So I want everyone to hold on to that, okay? Leaving my youngest sibling, who was still in school, often alone at the house and not knowing where she's at. Is there a grace period that should be given when the main perpetrator is removed from the home and the remaining family is so highly impacted that they all need time to get themselves together before the kids can really expect the safer parent to step in, like a kind of scatter and regroup kind of effect? Um, I don't think so. In the last part of the question is for context, reached out in a voicemail after months of not talking, which I was treated very coldly through text. I listed all the things that have hurt me and my siblings and was given this response. Best of luck to you. No apologies, no validation, no I love yous. I responded even more coldly in turn, to which I was told to pay for my own phone, my own car insurance, and turn off my spare house key. I am moved out and no longer live in the home. I have since blocked her. I'm really sorry that and I relate to it. I had like a similar kind of rupture with a parent. And I think that there is really a process that we all go through of really recognizing who the safer parent is and how damaging they are. Your question is a good example of that. Like in the prior question, where we're just thinking that mom is being abused by the husband and who did such a number on the whole family that, and again, this is an inner child thing where our inner child is looking at mom kind of going, there's got to be a really good, sane mother in there. She's just probably really kind of battered, and I'm just going to hang out and wait for her to show up. But what you're recognizing is she was out of there. She went and found a boyfriend, other kids. So where my brain goes in the question is, you might have a mom that's pretty kind of like low key and covert where, best of luck to you when you asked for accountability or wanted to state your truth. Coldness. I'm done with you. You're dead to me. She's kicking you out of the house kind of stuff from that. And it's these situations with the safer parent is the thing we need to take in, this is my best advice to you, that behavior from your mother was always lying in wait. And sometimes when we have a mother like that, that is shadowed by the main perpetrator, she's also just trying to get through existence with him, and I very much get that as well. But, this is really your mom sounds like the mom that I would call the mom or the parent that's like the "fuck my life" parent. Does anyone have a parent that's like that? You try to call them like, "Well, dad, I wanna talk about, my stepmom," and he's just like, "Oh, again, somebody else is just gonna, like, ream me for my choices in life," and they go to this highly kind of self-righteous victim place, you know? So, if this mother was a client, I would imagine kind of forecasting here, I don't know these people, so this is just where my brain goes with it. I don't have a crystal ball. I would just though imagine that she would be giving me a long list of how life had wronged her, specifically with the husband, and that the kid should be more understanding of her, and that she's most likely pretty removed from her marriage, from how she was as a parent, from how she looked for an escape in another man and other kids, and wanted to have a do-over in her life, and her kids probably got really erased in that. So good on you for calling it out, but these parents are really, really kind of tricky in that way. The other thing is our inner child could be watching this woman be like another sibling who's also getting abused. So we can have a lot of compassion for her. We can have a lot, and we're kids, so we don't, kids also tend to pick good guy, bad guy kind of a thing. And we need the safer parent to survive the perpetrating parent. So it's a lot. I'm just saying that we can really see the person's true colors um, in a divorce, or when they get out, or when the perpetrator leaves. They don't become who we thought that they would become. And again, there's more work to do around mom in this case than the main perpetrator dad. So but you have a question there, is there a grace period? That might be telling me, your statement there, that might be coming from your inner child who is still making special circumstances for mom, because you're kind of in that is like where, yes, there's going to be a regrouping and a process for people when a perpetrator leaves or there's a new situation going on. But I wonder if your inner child was still kind of maybe holding out hope in that kind of concept, because it's like where the other thing to relate to you and give you some compassion here is that we're not a-holes for holding out hope for a mom like this. You know what I mean? Like, you've just been your whole life, you've been seeing the whole thing kind of play out. And don't walk away from this me saying you should have seen all that coming. It's impossible because as kids, we don't get any help from adults with knowing what abusive behavior is. And we're just doing a really good job surviving these families by surviving on hope. Raise your hand out there if you were like, maybe dad will be good today. Maybe mom will be in a good mood. You know, that takes a long time to stop thinking or feeling in that way. And it's, yes, right, the void between. It's very human to not want to think the worst of people in that way. So the process that the author is, it really kind of kicks our ass of holding out hope, seeing some true colors, a lot of cognitive dissonance, feeling guilt and shame about what we're actually perceiving to be correct, and trying to get something going there. And at the end of the day, we have like nothing to work with. Really, really hard. It's a hard process. So some self-compassion for yourself in this. It's really a mind F as well. Because I really love this question. She goes to a new boyfriend and invests more with his kids. That's usually a very subtle, surreal experience. Did anyone have a parent who cheated on the other that was real casual and sneaky about it? Or these things, like these people are not all there. But as kids, we kind of go, I just kind of can see like, you and your siblings in the teenage years, and she's just like, I'm moving out, you know what I mean? I'm gonna be with Bill's kids for a little while, so, like, there's pizza in the microwave or something like that, or not even that, and that can feel really surreal where the you and the siblings are like, "Okay," like, we're all living in this weirdo dream in those moments in these families. Hopefully, I don't hopefully that wasn't too much of an existential tangent, but anyone relate to what I'm saying there, where it's sort of like there's a reality that is a not reality that people readily accept. So it's just weird stuff. Okay. Really appreciate that question. Next question. I've had to go no contact. My family are dangerous, abusive, and cruel, and I miss them. I miss them so much that the grief makes me worry one day I'll go back, which I have done several times before. And I don't know how to process this part. And I know I can't put myself in harm's way being in touch with them. I don't see anyone else talking about this aspect, and many don't seem to understand. Any discussion is welcome. Thank you for all that you do. I would want to maybe challenge you to work with your inner child. And again, there's all kinds of tools in my membership, and we do a specific tool called dialoguing in the membership where we have conversations on paper with our inner child. And this would be a really good conversation to have. Let me put this in the chat. Um, that's the membership. Maybe that got shut down. Maybe put it, hang on one second, everybody. Okay. Oh, James is here. Hey, James. Everyone say hi to James. He's my helper. He's like my digital bodyguard or something. Hello, James. Welcome. That's the membership. Let me give you the 20% off for 2 months code, which is helpful. Just means you can kind of check it out at a lower rate. To dialogue with the inner child about this one in this question, again, they're saying they're awful, but I miss them. I don't, I'm paraphrasing, but like, I don't trust myself to maybe not go back. Can you talk about this issue? Yes. I would say, I would challenge you to think about, you might be confusing missing your family with grief around the family that you actually needed and didn't get. So I want to say that again, because when we think about when we start to have magical thinking, we'll do this in abusive romantic relationships as well. We'll start to have magical thinking and fantasies about tiny little crumbs and good times and that kind of a thing. Or we're still worried about mom or dad being with their other abusive parent or whatever, and it really pulls on our heart. But the other thing that we're not working on or we're not thinking of is the grief around the family we actually didn't get. The other thing that compounds this is it's the loneliest I've ever been in my life is when I went no contact around 2021. Hardest probably year of my life, and it was longer than a year. It was just the hardest thing I've ever did because I just felt so free floating and alone in the world without family. So in some ways, I know it might seem that I talk about this in a light way or in a casual way about going no contact is the hardest thing any of us will ever really do. And once we kind of make the decision to do that, we are now in kind of a no person's land where we don't belong to a community yet and we don't belong to a family anymore. So it's extremely lonely. But I would start to dialogue with your inner child and start to challenge and start reminding yourself about why you went no contact and to start to having a conversation. Do we miss them or are we really lonely and maybe grieving about a family that we actually needed? That kind of stuff, we all feel that, for example, around the holidays, or if you're out and about and you're at a restaurant and you see grandparents just sort of totally in love with their toddler grandchild and having what seems like to you a good relationship with their actual child. And I mean, just seeing that will break your heart when you're in that situation. So it is very difficult, but that would be my advice for this one is to start to do some inner child work and start to really unpack and challenge. There's a belief system going on where our inner child needs help because inner children don't see toxicity. They see potential and they just want connection no matter what. That's why as really little kids, we will try to get a moody, angry, abusive parent to be happy if we will take that risk or something like that, or we'll try to take care of another parent who is really in a sad place, because kids are just heart based. So, but that's dangerous because our inner child holding that heart based thing would get into some magical thinking, some fantasy, some built in forgetter kind of stuff. So we need excuse me, we need our inner healthy parent, inner adult, to kind of go, wait a minute, you can be sad, we can be sad together, but remember, remember, I want to remind you what last Thanksgiving was like. Let's look at the last text that we got from mom about how she raged at us about just asking a question. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of work that kind of happens there. And as always, if you're doing that around other people, like in the membership, it gets a lot easier to have some support from either somebody, if not the membership, if you can find a therapist, if you can find somebody, that is very, very helpful to kind of do. Because another interesting thing about no contact, it's a reprieve, but it's also time to start building surrogate family and community. Because if you're just doing it alone, to be blunt here, you're kind of screwed, because you can't do this stuff in your head and you can't do this stuff really in a bubble. And I'm sorry to say that. I mean, so many people want to do it that way because people are exhausting and people are scary, but it's imperative to find people who are in the same boat, who can be connected to you in that way, even if it's in a really, really small way. So, really appreciate that question. Quick question here. How do you go no contact with your mother and not look bad to the rest of the family? Is it best to formally explain your decision? No, I don't think you have to kind of make a grand declaration about it. This is also where the membership would come in, because we talk about this in the membership where um, there's an inner child piece with this question, is to start encouraging the inner child to think a little bit like this. I'm not trying to be dismissive or flippant with this, but we kind of need to say to the inner child too, so what if people don't respect our decision? It's not their decision to make. So what if they judge us, but they weren't there? So what if we look bad to the rest of the family? And also, it's kind of in society, in these families, we all have to accept that there's no way to not look bad. There's no way to not look like a wacky radical. There's no way to not look like the a-hole, because that's how both society and these families, it's changing a little bit now, but do you guys worry? Do you guys feel that? Do you guys worry about what people think? It'd be a beautiful goal to get ourselves to sort of be more empowered with it, you know? And it's kind of human for people to kind of think that way, because the human existence is so deeply rooted in family. So I think we have to kind of like step into it a bit. And as hard as that really is, but the inner child piece here is, it's never been safe for us to be misunderstood, because most likely we've always been attacked for being the one talking about feelings, being the one talking about hurt, even if we were small. So it's kind of not new a little bit, but I find where I was often most triggered about is where people, a girlfriend's mother that I dated triggered the mess out of me when she really judged me for going no contact, and I'll never really kind of forget that. It just like, it's where really raw from going no contact, and people have a lot of opinions, but we can get to a place of like just acceptance of, they're gonna think whatever, but F it, they weren't there. They're not me. A really helpful thing is kind of a funny thing that I say to people. Next time someone says, but she's your mom, or if your aunt is just like, I'm really disappointed that you can't come together with your mom. Tell them, go live with my mother for a couple years. Go live with my mother for 3 months. Go live with my dad, and check in on your mental health when you're living with them. See how long you get. See how that goes. No, I'm not trying to like be provocative, but just something you would say to yourself in your head. Because the inner child is going to go, "Oh, I'm such an F up. I'm so wrong. I should go back and I hate that they know that." And, we can feel really dirty. We can feel really shameful for going no contact when it's unnecessary. We just really have to get to a place of acceptance that people are going to think that way. But again, they weren't in the trench with you when it was going on. So I really appreciate that question. Um, Next question. I sent them a cutoff letter explaining my reason for the cutoff. I disapprove of their neglectful and abusive parenting towards me and my siblings, but I'm struggling to create a long term plan for my cutoff. Our communication has always been infrequent, shallow, and one way. They call me when they need something, and I'm perfectly content not communicating or sharing anything about my personal life with them. Cutting them off entirely for the rest of our lives seems extreme, but I don't have close relationships with them, and I don't feel the need or desire to create one. So it's an interesting, I know what you mean. Like sometimes it just can feel like there's such a dud of these relationships that we can be a little bit caught. They have never expressed any interest in my personal life. That's bad. That's hurtful before, and I don't expect them to start caring if I restart communication. I think they will just use it as an opportunity to try to force me back into my role. I would 1,000% agree with that, as the parentified golden child. Do I owe them the This is the question I want everyone to zero in on. Do I owe them the opportunity to communicate with me and share their opinions about the cutoff? My answer is no, because you've already well stated out and thought about it, about why you went no contact to begin with. And also, I want everyone to take this in. Most likely, we've all been trying since the age of 4, 3 or 4, 2 even, to try to get something going with our family, to try to make the connection, to try to either help them emotionally, to try to who as a kid would start to want to make the holidays nicer, or who as a kid wanted to be such a good kid to not stress out the parents, who really tried to have conversations and you get shot down a lot. So we can really get caught up in a very repetitive um, codependent cycle. So it's sort of like I would just sort of say, I'm just trying to say, you've already done your due diligence with your family. Do you owe them the opportunity to communicate and share their opinions about the cutoff? I would say no, but I would say I think your inner child might be asking that question because the questions assumes kind of that they're going to give you a rational response, which they won't. So there might be a little bit of kind of the inner child might be, it's very generous what you're suggesting. Do I owe them the opportunity to communicate with me and share their opinions? In one way, you also say they have never expressed any interest in my personal life. So I don't think that they're going to be real and authentic and be curious about what you're doing, why you're kind of doing this. So I love the question. I really appreciate it. And I think it's coming from your inner child who just needs some help with reminding them that um, these people don't share opinions in a really loving and respectful way, most likely, given how, it's been a one-way street. Your inner children do this. And I would love to hear from you in the chat. Who has ever had to do a breakup conversation and you kind of expected the person to be hunky dory with it? Anyone, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of you were so keyed up, you get this, I'll just tell them this and I'll tell them that, or I'll tell my boss, I'll state my boundaries. And there's kind of the inner child might have a little bit of a fantasy about like, well, they'll just have to take in what I'm saying. And it definitely doesn't go that way. It definitely becomes an S show, like a poop show. Inner children can have some weird expectations when we have to do something hard. Even many childhood trauma survivors can get really nasty with somebody and expect someone to take it too. Maybe our family is like that and expect people like I'm just going to really tell them off and I'm going to get really loud and I'm going to swear at them. and they better just be quiet and just be really obedient, and that's how it should go, you know. Inner children can do that, just FYI. So it's I might hear that a little bit in your question. I hope that that was helpful, and I hope I'm reading these questions right. I can overread into these questions, so I don't know if that's helpful to you, but that's kind of what I do. And you asked. So I really appreciate that. Next question. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for making the videos. I find them very useful. Over the last year, I began reducing contact with the toxic narcissistic parent, seeing them only 3 times on major holidays and group settings. They are visiting the town where I live in a couple weeks, and I'm not sure how to explain I don't want to meet up. This one's tricky, everybody. I've debated lying, but feel guilty, even though I want to tell her the truth, as it would become, I don't want to tell her the truth, as it would become very confrontational. I know what you mean, and further degrade the relationship. I know in the future I may go no contact, but I don't feel ready for that conversation yet, especially with extended family. How can I approach this and stay true to myself? Oh, I love this question so much. I don't love your situation. My heart breaks for you in this situation because you're really caught. And how do I express this? It's sort of like existentially, the question outlines the problem that we have with our relationships with abusive or toxic parents. We can go low or no contact, which is good, and we can get a lot of reprieve from that. Um, I'm just trying to say there's a lot of like not a lot of win situations in these family systems. And I just kind of want to be compassionate about that, because it's very painful to have your mom in your life. You reduce contact and making it tolerable and manageable, hopefully working on healing yourself and doing some work there. But then they're visiting town in a couple of weeks. And it's sort of like the elephant is being dropped off a plane into like your yard. It's just so right there. I would say, you have to make the best decision for yourself. um, you could say you're busy, you could tell the truth. You're not ready to go full contact yet. You may, and again, this is, you may just, you don't want to meet with them, but maybe meet with them and say you're busy, meet with them once for a cup of coffee or something like that if you just need to do that. I even hate that advice. I even hate what I just said. But again, I'm trying to outline the problem with this stuff is that we're caught. And sometimes we have to make really big decisions and pull the trigger on things like you're suggesting. You may not be ready for no contact yet, but I'm just trying to say this is the situation that leads people to go no contact. And what I mean about being caught is, I'll channel my mentor here. I was like, she said, I never forget this, when my mentor, Amanda Curtin, said to me, "You have nothing to work with." And it was like the most sobering statement I have ever had someone tell me about my family, specifically my parents. You have nothing to work with. In a way, like, you can't tell them the truth because they're going to be really confrontational. They won't do any accountability. You can kind of get away with seeing them 3 times in a year. You probably still hung over from that, and it's really difficult, and you probably dread it. What You have nothing to work with. If we had something to work with, you could call your mom and have a 2-hour conversation of clearing the air if she was healthy, and maybe give you space on that trip, or ask, can we just meet up once for lunch or something like that, and that you're seen as a person. And if we had that, we wouldn't need to go no contact. So I probably am not giving you a great answer for this question, because it just spells out more of the problem in this thing. So I really want you all to take that in, that we have nothing to work with in these situations. So sometimes in these questions, people are asking me, you know, they're presenting a situation where they have nothing to work with. And then they're asking me for a tip within that. And it's just kind of, I would redirect them back to, like I just did, about, we've got nothing to work with here. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see a way, and I know you get this too. And I don't see a way. I don't have a solution that is something that's like a win-win, you know? And I suggested go to have lunch with them and just get that off the table, get that dread off the table that they're there for 3 weeks in your town and pretend you're busy. Like I said, I hate that advice that I just said, but it speaks to we have nothing to work with. Does that make sense to you all out there? If you could put a thumbs up, yes, no wins available. And it speaks to I would rather us be thinking about that way than trying to make something work. I know that don't take that as defeatist. It's just that might influence our decisions in a way that's best for us. So, okay, really appreciate that question. um, Next one. I've been low contact with my parents since 2015. Very low contact for the past year. Only 3 emails, 3 extended family events. Since I tried to explain some of my pain to them last summer and felt suicidal after the interchange, I can imagine. I am much happier, thriving more in other relationships when not talking to them. Good. But I'm trying to get over two things. I feel like I owe them an emotional relationship because they helped me out monetarily as college as a young adult. I'm in my 40s now, and I still sometimes feel like if I explain it again, they will understand. Though I know intellectually that's your inner adult, the intellectual part. They won't. Any insight on getting over these two things would be helpful. Um, Inner child work is going to really help you with your inner child. Again, like I said earlier, has fantasies of their potential. We'll have fantasies about having a conversation, and our dad or our mom will be like, oh, I never thought about that way, that makes so much sense, I'm so sorry. Like, that's the fantasy. Why do we fantasize about that? Because that would be so healing. And everyone take this in. If we got that, we wouldn't need therapy. We wouldn't need to show up to Patrick's Live if we had a healing connection with parents where, and it's kind of sad because so much healing could come from a parent just sort of not being defensive and owning something. But they feel like they're going to die if they own something. They really feel that they're going to lose their soul if they admit that they were physically abusive or emotionally off or whatever, when, like, raise your hand up there if you had a parent own it and be real with you and apologize and really see you, would you be back in contact with them? I fucking would. So it's just dropped an F-bomb. Sorry. Um, it's sad, it's really because it could be, it's not that hard. No one's gonna die. Um, so, but dialoguing with the inner child about the fantasy, thinking that they might understand is the one thing. The first question you have, feeling like guilt over that they helped you in college, it'd be good to dialogue, which is a tool we use in the membership. There's a whole course on reparenting the inner child in my membership. You can also get it outside of the membership. Yes, it's an a la carte course where we reparent the inner child about these beliefs. And one thing that I would sort of parent the inner child around about the college and the money thing is this is both a cultural, this can get wacky culturally, but in Western culture, that for me falls under basic parenting that they helped financially through college. And that's kind of, it's a basic. And why I zero in on that is we will, two things go on. I think that the toxic parent tends to inflate basic things. You had food on the table, you had clothing, you had education. Those are basic parental things. And I know that for some of you that grew up in poverty, it wasn't basic, and I get that. But the way that it's weaponized or talked about is, you know what I mean? I'm not, if I send my child to college, I kind of know that that's what I signed up for. And I would hope that they would work a little bit through college or whatever, but I'm going to be still a financial resource with them until they're gainfully employed. Again, that's very different opinions, socioeconomic stuff, cultural stuff, but both the parental systems and the children in toxic families, they both tend to inflate basics. So anyone out there, feel guilty that, like you had a really abusive parent and a really horrible childhood, but they would take you for ice cream once a week. or something like that, or they really liked video games and would play that with you, and that's the thing that you hold on to, like, "Oh, I have to cut my dad off, but, we played Super Mario Kart for years together, it was our thing," you know? But he didn't protect you from mom, he didn't watch his anger, he didn't watch his drinking, but he played Super Mario Kart with you, is we're inflating that. It's kinda like a crumb kind of a thing. And yes, or trips, you know, and they're just such a smaller part of the story. I'm not trying to totally erase those things. My mom and I, we had a really, really great connection. There's things I still appreciate about my mom, but all the abuse overshadows that. But when I started my recovery, it was the other way around. It was only the good things that I used to excuse the bad things to survive. So our inner child needs a lot of help in those conversations. And the tool of dialoguing with our inner child is, on paper, we're using our dominant hand and our non-dominant hand to do like a journal-based conversation. And that's the place that we start reparenting our inner child. It's a great way to get out of triggers, changing belief systems about ourselves. It's the best tool that we use where you don't necessarily need to be doing it with a therapist, and you can find it in the membership. Um, let's see. So this is, one second. Let me put the membership back in the thing. Okay, here is some information about the membership, where about all the dialoguing stuff and more that I just talked about. And we also have a discount code, no contact. This is 20% off for the first 2 months. So you could just kind of check it out. You cancel at any time if you like. There's that. Okay. Moving on to the next question. I hope that that was helpful to you. I really appreciate that question. Let me go back and find the question. Okay, great. Hi, Patrick. I've been in zero contact with my dad for 5 years and mom for about 2.5 years. And as a result, I'm finally at peace. Good. However, I feel total shame when people ask, have you spoken to your mom? How was your dad? Is there a blanket statement I can use so that I'm not oversharing? I'm also working on boundaries. Only my husband really understands my CPTSD, and childhood trauma and my need to go no contact. My in-laws' friends say they understand, yet treat me like I'm going through a phase. I know what you mean by that, and yes, you're right. WTF? That can feel condescending when they kind of like, "Oh, you just must be going through something." Like, yeah, I am. I am going through something. Um, how to respond to these questions? Have you spoken to your mother? How's your dad? And again, to channel my mentor, I would just tell the truth, you know, and it doesn't have to be standoffish. It doesn't have to be provocative. Where I think we really get squirrely around these situations because it's painful for us. It's complicated. Do we lie? Do we downplay it? And I would just say, I don't know. You're welcome to ask them. We're not really in contact at the moment. There's really no shame or even awkwardness in that. It is just your truth. And you're not oversharing. You're just sort of, look at it this way. Look at it as almost just like, like maybe someone says, oh, Jane, like, how is Robert? You're such a nice couple. And you're just kind of like, Robert and I broke up 6 months ago. Just wasn't working out. Like, that's just telling the truth. I know that that's overly simplifying it, but why I suggest that is, we're going no contact, but we're also working on our own sense of empowerment and power and telling the truth. And really, what telling the truth is a really good action oriented exercise in not taking on the shame, because these are things we would not have chosen. Nobody out there would have chosen to have a non-protective mother who was very kind of like covert narcissism victimy, and a blatantly abusive, rageful, violent father. We wouldn't have chosen all that. So when we make the decision for ourselves to leave, that is an empowering decision. But so much shame of it comes in. Our inner child believes everyone knows. Am I doing the right decision? Did I not do enough? So again, we had nothing to work with. So I think I have an analogy to it is that we need to start practicing our own sovereignty. Like you're your own nation, and just telling the truth of like, oh, we're not really in contact right now. I don't really know how they're doing, but thanks for asking. That's like a sovereignty kind. It's like a declaration of independence. That is very different when we kind of go like, oh, geez, yeah, like, oh, well, I got a nice Christmas card from mom, and I think that mom, she loves the garden. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just we can feel like we've let ourselves down in that. Do you guys know what I mean by that? Because it's just like we're kind of avoiding our truth in that way. So really tricky. And again, none of us would have chosen these situations. So let's see. How many more questions? I'm going to do all of them. I got three more questions before I sign off. Dear Patrick, my decision to go low or no contact was met with little resistance from my parents. I was speaking to this one earlier. It almost seems like there was a decision. It almost seems like it was their decision, not mine. My father separated from my mother, stopped communicating with me a long time ago, and my mother only sends me text messages for my birthday and Christmas. Oof, they are, it's why I go oof on that is that this is probably it's like a tricky family thing where, other people can say like there's so many more worse situations than just getting those texts, but I think this is awful to say. I would have I think I would choose loud abusive physical behavior than the trauma around being neglected and not seen and not known. I know that that sounds wacky, but that's where my oof was kind of coming from there. They are both focused on living their best life during their retirement years, investing in travel and home improvements. It feels as if they are living the way they've always wanted to without having children in the way, mainly me. No attempts to reconcile were made by them, even though I told them how unhappy and lonely I felt as a child. It's as if I never existed. Going low or no contact was a long and difficult decision for me. And the fact that they were okay with it feels like such a double whammy. Yes, because it is. I was heartbroken before, and they broke my heart even further. I want to make peace with my life and the fact that it didn't matter to me. I want to make peace with my life and the fact that I didn't matter to my parents. But how do I do that? Um, I would find a good trauma therapist and I would start to get pissed off about how there are just parents out there that have children and treat them as if they're like a house pet and not a human being. And by that, they treat them with a really kind of casual, you're just kind of their relationship. And we can really feel invisible. We can feel derealization, depersonalization from that lack of being known and connection and attunement. Um, and in an upcoming video I'm releasing this weekend, this is one of the examples I give where we go no contact and there's really no reaction from the family. There's just, or it's already so estranged and not connective that it doesn't even sort of matter. Um, I would find a good therapist. You could welcome to check out the membership, and I would be encouraging you to start to shift it from the shock of being invisible to shifting it to start to cultivate some anger that these two people had children with no intention of really getting to know them. And they can also have parents like that can have kind of a lot of swagger in their silence. They can have a lot of like they're living their best lives kind of a thing. Um, Really, it's just a classic example of parents having children and being totally removed from their responsibility, how it works. I just watched Oppenheimer, and in that movie, he married somebody who was an alcoholic, and they're having a child, and he's in the middle of creating this atomic bomb, and the wife is home drinking and really nasty with their child at home. So he has this bright idea to take the child, an infant, you know what I mean, and give them to friends for a couple months so they can kind of like regroup and get it together. But there's really throughout that, I was just being me, just thinking about just like, wow, they're so even removed from the damage that they're already kind of creating. in that. Just that just kind of popped into my mind with this one. Find a good therapist, start the process, start to get pissed, start I would really start to protect your inner child from believing what the parents believe about you. Because the inner child is going to be feeling, well, I guess I am unlovable. They were totally, it's like you kind of gave them one last option to kind of wake up and be parents for you, and they were like, no, thanks. So the inner child is going to go, I guess I'm sort of worthless. I guess I'm not lovable. And I would get pissed off on behalf of your inner child and really work with that inner child and start to dialogue with them and say the stuff that's kind of like, you've always been lovable. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time with these people. These people are a-holes. And start to do some work in that way. Here's what not to do is in my group work, when people would sign up, I used to run a 6 month, we also, if you're looking for a therapist too, let me put that link. Let's see. If you are looking for an RRP therapist, there is an Instagram account and a link tree to this Instagram account with a whole bunch of people that we have trained. And the work that I'm referencing is you can do this kind of work with them is to get pissed at these parents on behalf of the inner child, start to reparent them in a group of other people. But back to my point is when I would start these groups, I'm no longer running them. I would say there was a 6 month version of this work, and I would say use this group to make a decision. Use the work in this group to finally make a decision about whether your parents were right about you or not. And that question really makes me think about that statement because we have to do some work to kind of really reject the messages that we got from these people. And you're getting a lot of indirect kind of like, they don't know you, they don't invest in you. Those send some big core beliefs that are really unfair. So that's what my advice to you there. And I really kind of felt that question. I really appreciate that question. Two more questions. Let's see. What happens? Let me 1 second. A little bit of water getting froggy. How many people are here? How are we doing out there? How's everyone doing? I've been talking for so long, it kind of feels like I'm talking at myself, but I really appreciate that you all here. And wow, there's a lot of you. There's 571 people here. Oh my gosh. Are you having a good time talking about these horrific situations? It's good times. I lost my thing. Okay. One more second. Where'd it go? Okay. I'm just going to keep talking. And where'd my questions go? Okay. This is an important question about you'll just get it. What happens when I get a future phone call when one or both of my narcissistic older siblings washes up on some social service institution's front lawn because they have burned through all their money and social connections, they have no place to go and no one to manipulate. I am no contact since last fall, former family scapegoat, empath leaning, and 15 years younger. I realizing that I am catastrophizing, predicting, but I would love to just not answer the phone. How do we safely proceed through a situation like this should it still come up? Thank you so much. Really appreciate the question. There does come a time when, depending on the family, where family members or parents or siblings, they kind of crash and burn. And wouldn't wish that on anybody, but when people don't take care of their mental health, when they're not real about their family system, when they can kind of manipulate and get through with things, people do eventually kind of crash and burn. And just quickly, my advice would be you already know your answer. I would just you probably just need a green light to say you don't have to pick up the phone when that calls. And I would never shame somebody who is in that situation and they're like, my dad is homeless and I haven't spoken to him in 15 years. He threw a drink in my face the last time I saw him when I challenged him on stuff. And now he wants to come live with me just out of the blue. And Again, our inner child might feel shame. Society might say that we're bad for not doing that. Culturally, there's kind of like an Eastern Western kind of a thing where Western culture is more individualistic, which is good and bad things about it, and other cultures, sort of are not, which has good and bad things about it. But I would say, if it's going to really disrupt your mental health and you have nothing to work with, and would you just be another enabling entity, then don't pick up the phone. Or if you do pick up the phone and hear about it, really get some support and take care of yourself, specifically around you're not bad for saying no. And a helpful tip is to also look at it as, people need to crash and burn. People need to hit a bottom. Kind of like what they teach us in sort of like 12-step and Al-Anon is if it's awful like if they've been enabled by institutions and other people, um, they're just looking for a repeat of that. So really appreciate that. Last question. I really appreciate you all for hanging out with me. And let's see, how do you deal with accidentally running into your parents or family that you have cut ties to? I cut ties to my toxic parents 2 months ago, and I live in a small city, and there's a big chance I'll eventually run into someone. How do you deal with the guilt of your brain questioning the validity of your cutting ties? I'm so much happier since I cut ties, but having been gaslit a lot and thinking of ways that I'm wrong even now, and then I start questioning if I'm wrong in doing this. Love from Finland. I would start dialoguing with your inner child, because in those moments, um, it's really good to get in shape and learn how to reparent your inner child, because eventually stuff hits the fan, such as running into family in a city. That's going to be very triggering. And it's really good to have this tool to be able to regulate yourself and work on beliefs. Um, there's other things in the membership too, that just like the community help. There's a bunch of like journal prompts. There's a bunch of courses specifically related to your question of what do you do. There's two things going on. There is kind of, if you were to run into them, there'd be the shock of that. But I want to say to you that just it's almost like, and I don't mean to say this again to be provocative or to be flippant, but so what if you do run into them? It doesn't take away your power. It doesn't take away your truth. It would be awkward. It would be hard, but so what? And that so what is also something you can help your inner child with, as you're saying in the question about maybe not trusting your reasons why. And that's where the reparenting is really helpful. And you could do a dialogue sort of saying like, um, let's just say your name was Jane. Little Jane, I notice we think about running into mom and dad in the city that we live in a lot. Can you tell me about that? And your inner child will respond and say, who knows what they would say, but let's just say that they say, I'm so scared of that because they're going to tell me I'm bad and I need to go back with them, and they're probably right. Then the inner adult can respond with your dominant hand and say, wow, that's a lot. Let's talk about why we went no contact to begin with, because I want to help you feel safe. So, and in that process, you're being a loving parent for your inner child, probably for the first time, and you're really helping curb that anxiety that they may have. But really, it is also so good for both of you, because you're doing work that prevents you from going back into the system if that's the fear. You know what I mean? We need our inner adult to kind of go, hey, wait a minute. I know that you want to reconnect with mom and dad, and I get that. Or you're worried that you're going to lose your truth or lose your footing and you have to go back to them, but that's not true. Let's talk about what they were like last time. Let's remember about why we went no contact to begin with. Why? Because inner children, they have this built-in forgetter. And they're kind of, until we're fully healed, they're not really, you can trust an inner child to really tell you up front that they're bad for making good decisions or making the best decision for you in going no contact. Does that make sense to you all? Do you guys relate to that? Like their inner child still feels bad for doing this. Inner children, they're going to need a lot of help with some reality testing, with some remember when, and also some belief work. That is, we're not bad for making ourselves available to abuse, and it's going to have to be a lot of repetition in the beginning, a lot of repetition about reminding them why, and it's really really powerful work. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like we're winging it. So there is that. And that's the live. That's all my questions. I'm out of questions. My throat's a little froggy. Um, really good to see you all. Was it helpful to you all? Is there something you want to put in the chat that kind of stuck out for you that really resonated? Because I'd love to know if this is helpful. What really stuck out to you? A little piece of advice. You're welcome. Thank you all so much. And again, I would love to see you all in the community or to check it out. Right now, it is open. And here's that link one more time. There is a discount code, 20% off for the first 2 months, just so you know, to kind of, you can check it out, download all the things, see if it's for you. People love it. Really check out, we have a blog, there's journal prompts. Check out, members get to contribute to a blog as well and connect there. We have some upcoming speakers that come to the membership. We meet twice a month. In the coming months, I'm going to have Kristen Neff, who is a leading psychologist in self-compassion, as well as Lindsay Gibson, who wrote The Emotionally Immature Parent. She's coming to do a chat. These are like, I'll interview them. The lives are about an hour and a half. I would love to see you all there. And I will do this again on another topic. Maybe a good one to do would be inner child stuff, questions about your inner child, because it's really difficult to kind of suss out, like, what's my inner adult, what's my inner child. And that's about it. I think I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining me. There'll be a recording of it. I'm going to go make some tea and probably go to sleep. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, one last thing. I'm doing a video on no contact, probably going to be released this Saturday. And it's, the topic is how parents respond to you going no contact. So that'll be premiering Saturday or Sunday at some point, but you'll get notifications. So that's coming up. Yes, and happy Pride Month. Good night, everybody. I'm going to sign off, and I will see you next time. How do I sign off? All right. I'm going to end the stream. Love you all. Bye.